Hello, this is a Brave Knight Mercenary Spotlight on Vermont. I want to preface this video with an apology on a fairly long hiatus. Life is very busy and work is just as equally busy. I still play Brave Knight and I still think it's a dope game, even if it doesn't draw a big player base. Anyways, moving on to Vermont. Vermont is a 5-star rarity defender. He's basically the president of arenas and is one of the greatest knights in this country. He is the generous man for granting us all these ancient coins, honor points, and diamonds for struggling in the arena. My only request is that he gives us more diamonds, specifically for placing in Crystal 3, because that's where I place more often than not because I forget to spam my swords on Saturday evenings. Vermont's companion is Hernella, and she is Alchie's mother and Vermont's daughter. After reading her biography, it's just mostly about how she found her love. Very cute. Hernella is also a whopping age of 35. She's probably the only female character that looks potentially old, and she is 35 years old. Almost as old as me, maybe. Go figure. I'll briefly go over Vermont's skills, gameplay style, and provide some of my opinions on him. I won't be going over the details of his skills, but just the general parts of it. I linked the Brave Knight Encyclopedia in the video description where you can easily read on the stats and skill. Vermont's first skill is Commanding Crest. This is a special bestowal skill that activates before battle. The skill ultimately behaves like a situational guard for Vermont. After the first turn, any attack made by Vermont's allies will generate a crest. Hitting multiple enemies with one attack will generate multiple crests. The moment Vermont gains 2 crests, Iron Wall activates and is a guard that prevents Vermont from receiving damage or debuffs for 4 to 5 turns. Vermont also gains a long-lasting boost to his crit damage that is also unremovable. If you're familiar with how Sucero's transformation works, then this skill also works similarly. Basically, Vermont requires his allies to hit the opponent to generate crests for him. Once he gets 2, he trades those crests immediately for a crit damage boost and a guard that blocks damage and debuffs. Very simple. It's still possible for Vermont to obtain crests while he has his guard up. If Vermont gains another 2 crests while he has his guard available, he'll overwrite his previous one with a new one. The crit damage buffs that he gets whenever he gets a new guard will still stack though. After Commanding Crest expires, Vermont can no longer generate crests or cash them out. Vermont's second skill is Clash. Before normal attack, Vermont deals guard ignoring additional damage that scales with his max HP. The skill always activates even if Vermont is silenced. At +6 and above, if the opponent dies during Vermont's attack, then he will gain a permanent max HP boost of a flat amount. Vermont's third skill is Tenacity. This is a permanent heal ability that occurs when battle begins. Vermont will heal part of the incoming damage that he will take from a damage source. The skill also boosts his defense based on his base defense. The less base defense he has, the more he gains. Basically, don't put defense runes on Vermont as you will just gain high defense naturally from the skill. Vermont's awakening skill is Silence. Vermont applies silence onto his enemies after normal attack. At +11, the silence also lowers the enemy's attack stat. Vermont is a roadblock defender with offensive capabilities. He can hold the position well in lane so long as his teammates can help him get started. Vermont is very tanky inherently, with his tenacity providing him with innate healing and high amount of defense. This is combined with his impressively high base HP. The crux of Vermont's defense though is his guard, which requires cooperation from his allies to kickstart. The moment his allies hit 2 units, Vermont will be near invincible for a short duration, and so long as your units continue to hit 2 units at a time, Vermont's guard can keep on refreshing. Vermont's also deceptively powerful as an offensive threat. Vermont's damage source comes from Clash, which scales with his already staggeringly high base HP. This damage source also ignores guards. Should Vermont score a kill, he gains max HP, which not only adds to his durability, but increases the damage of Clash. Clash can also crit, and remember that Vermont gains crit damage bonus whenever his guard activates. Vermont's main weakness as an offensive threat lies in the fact that his damage could be reduced by defense or incoming damage reduction. Vermont only ignores guards and nothing else, so you may have issues breaking through 100% defense units or units with 99.9% incoming damage reduction, or some units with a mix of both. Vermont's main weakness as a defensive unit is that he has some conditions that need to be met to be very tanky. Vermont by himself without his guard can die easily to anything that ignores defense while also being prone to any debuff. Remember that his guard appears based on if his teammates can hit 2 units, but in unlucky circumstances, his allies may only end up hitting 1 unit at a time, and in that one moment where his guard isn't up yet can be a fatal one. Also remember that Vermont's guard mechanic is only in play within the first 40 turns, so in the case that the game hits round 3 or 4, Vermont will lose his guard mechanic completely, and it's within the realm of possibility that a tanky unit like Vermont lives near the later stages of a fight. Vermont's preferred runes are Vitality runes, as all of his damage is centered around his max life. You can also run a bit of Fatal to capitalize off his crit damage with more stable crit chances if you won't buff him directly. Just make sure to avoid running defense, as his third skill has diminishing returns on his defense boost if you provide Vermont with base defense. I'll go over what Vermont counters. Vermont deals HP scaling damage that ignores guards, so naturally he'll beat units that rely on guards that have no other mitigations. Some notable examples of this are Kaelin, Seto, Lucius, and Yuri. However, if the enemy themselves don't have any damage mitigation at all, Vermont is highly able to kill them. Granhilder is an interesting one, as she has no damage reduction until she attacks, and so she takes the full brunt of Vermont's damage otherwise. This also includes Ledicrad. Even with damage mitigations, Vermont can still threaten many units that depends on guards. Valford and Mammonier are also in threat of dying to Vermont. Guard ignoring damage also gives Vermont an edge over Delcahidne, as her protection of her warriors depends on a guard. So long as a unit doesn't have insane defense or incoming damage reduction, they are liable to be killed by Vermont, especially once he starts gaining HP and crit damage. Because Vermont's additional damage occurs before normal attack, he has a slight edge over units that depend on Gray's mechanics to survive. This is primarily good against Albion buffed units, but can also be good against Glacia as well. Vermont can potentially kill Jhin, but you may need to have a Celia on your team to do so. Jhin has naturally very high defense and he also has incoming damage reduction, so Vermont needs to compensate by having his own buffs and finding methods to reduce Jhin's defense first. This particular interaction is definitely a stat check, but it's possible. Vermont can also tank many things with his guard once it's activated. It'll be easier to list what actually goes through his guard rather than what it just blocks, but just know that it blocks all damage other than direct damage and guard ignoring damage. I'll go over some Vermont counters now. To no surprise, direct damage is a good way to deal with Vermont as it bypasses his guard. Levia, Alec, Valze, Cilione, and Victor are the major direct damage dealers. In the circumstances that Vermont does not have his guard active due to his allies only hitting one target, Vermont is definitely killable with any defense ignoring damage that can deal enough. Potential candidates for this are Eden, Orfina, Susera, and Nartis. If this is early game where he hasn't ramped up his health yet, Seto and Siegmund are good choices to ignore his defense with fixed damage. Some other options to hurt him while he has his guard down are Kyria and Christina, as they can apply their DOT to take him down. Guard ignoring units are also solid against Vermont, primarily Dwen, whose attack ignores defense. Guard ignoring attacks still may suffer against Vermont due to his high defense, but Celia can potentially grant some openings for units like Barbariba or Cilione to do more work. Speaking of Cilione, her damage spread ignores both defense and guard, so if she amounts enough offensive stats, she can potentially kill Vermont with her AoE. So some synergies with Vermont. Vermont works on most compositions, but would appreciate things that provide him some utility in the form of either healing or offense. Vermont with Sola can have passive healing and more defense. Vermont also likes Galania for the second chance of living. Floria and Albion are also nice if you want to put taunt on your Vermont, and Floria is a great boost to his max HP, which also improves his offensive capabilities. Vermont also synergizes very well with Celia. Celia drops their defense, which gives Vermont more leeway to kill things. As for offensive stats, anything that buffs Vermont's offense is good. Crit rate is particularly valuable to ensure that Vermont can always take advantage of his crit damage boost, so Galania is once again a good choice. Asmode is also nice, and there's always Verfithia and Bilieth as well. One interesting note is that Barbariba works quite nicely with Vermont, because if a Barbariba scores the kill for Vermont, he still gets the HP boost. Vermont's HP boost occurs when the enemy dies, so long as the enemy dies during this turn, he gets the max HP. Last but not least, we have Ledicrad. Vermont has one skill that can be duplicated by Ledicrad, and it is Commanding Crest. This allows Ledicrad to copy Vermont's conditional guard buff that grants him debuff immunity and damage mitigation. Command Crest works a bit like a different version of Kaelin's Drunken Guard. Drunken Guard has the weakness of requiring Ledicrad to attack to activate it, and it only lasts 5 turns, unless Ledicrad is hit, which will refresh it. Commanding Crest has the luxury of not requiring Ledicrad to move in order for him to have the guard, but it will require Ledicrad's allies to charge the crest for him. Commanding Crest has a few weaknesses in that it doesn't last long and it has some inconsistencies, so mostly think of the skill as a bonus for running the two together, but not a foolproof strategy. Drunken Guard is a lot more stable for Ledicrad overall. You shouldn't be too concerned about what Vermont provides for Ledicrad and focus more on Vermont as a unit and what he provides for the composition. Okay, so for my opinion, when Vermont dropped, I wasn't really sure how to see him at first. He has a lot of mechanics splattered across his skill set, and it's kind of messy when you look at it. He has a guard skill that boosts his crit damage, he has a guard ignoring additional damage that scales with his max HP and will increase his max HP if he scores a kill. He boosts his own defense in his zone, and he has a silence. Not too complex in the context when compared to other characters, but it's kind of more so an argument that he just has a lot of different things happening. With that said, using Vermont is fairly simple. He's just simply a beefy character with decent offensive qualities. Kind of like Lillian, Vermont is a roadblock tank with offensive utility. In fact, Vermont's actually quite good as an offensive unit, strangely enough. It really shouldn't be understated in how much damage that Vermont can actually output. His high base HP combined with the additional damage that can crit can result in some devastating hits even if the unit has high defense or incoming damage reduction. The guard penetration is just the icing on the cake really. The main issue with Vermont is that his guard ultimately doesn't last that long. A 40 turn guard that starts at the beginning of battle is actually quite short for a character like Vermont who has potential to stay alive in a fight. Once that guard is gone, all debuffs are on the table and Vermont can quickly crumble. Vermont sees use in all contests of the game. Arena and Guild Wars are good formats for him to be in, and he's especially nice to use in your Guild War defense at times. He's also a great unit for transport world bosses due to his high base health. So the question begs, should you invest in Vermont? My answer is 50-50 on this one. He's a good independent character for sure and can be flexed in a variety of compositions. I think he's pretty solid overall, and having defenders with high offensive capabilities is really valuable in your team. Currently, the only defenders with really strong offensive presence are Orfina and Mammonier. Most other defenders have some conditions that need to be met in order to start dealing considerable damage, like Bane, Ledicrad, or Kaelin. The niche of an offensive defender lies in that you can circumvent metas with unique teams. For example, as of this video, a lot of arena formations specifically use the Vulcan spell to stun your warriors. A way to work around this is to initiate with a defender who could perform similar functions to a warrior, and lo and behold, Vermont fits that bill quite nicely. He's a good character to have, but is not generally the core of any composition. He's not a must build, but is mostly a nice to have. Vermont's also relatively cost efficient as well. A lot of his skills work well as early skill levels. Plus 10 is a nice goal to reach because his HP gain on kill is optimized at that point. Plus 12 is where his defense skill is optimized, and plus 13 to 15 will improve his guard skill in different ways which are appreciated but not necessary. Plus 14 is nice as it increases his guard skill to 41 turns, but his final plus 15 goal will increase his guard duration from 4 to 5. It can come in clutch at times, but if you're constrained in resources, this is not a game changer. Overall, Vermont's rework is a good one, and he's quite fun to use. Remember not to underestimate this dude's damage. I saw mine one-shotting Ledicrad and Grandhilders while also popping Mammoniers as well. This dude is like 80 and he's still kicking ass. The companion on the other hand, I feel kind of betrayed. When I first saw her, I finally thought to myself, dang, they finally put a grandma character in the game. And I'm so hyped for Battle Grandma. And then I find out she's 35 years old. Like, I'm getting close to that age. I don't know what to feel, honestly. Am I an old man too? Yeah, damn. Thanks for watching my Vermont Mercenary Spotlight. Stay tuned for more. And once again, thanks for the support.